Welcome back, folks. Episode 41, Get a Grip on Lighting. Today, folks, we're going in a different direction. We have David Rehimi from ChargePoint, and we were talking about electric vehicle charging stations. What? On the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, Greg? Really? Why did we do that?
Something different.
Something different. Yeah, something different for you guys out there, because we felt like there's a lot of similar things between electric vehicle charging stations and the lighting business. We're talking about rebates from the government. We're talking about saving energy, filling out those rebate applications and selling on energy savings. Plus, you have it on your shelf and you give it to the customer. So maybe lighting distributors can start selling electric vehicle charging stations. I know I'm thinking about it. I don't think Greg is, but I am. So I thought I'd bring him on the show. So thanks, David Rehimi, for coming on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by Sign Hero from Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, Sign Hero. That's right. Greg, tell me a little bit about Sign Hero.
Well, Sign Hero is a unique solution to a problem that's out in the lighting field right now. We get into a lot of lighting retrofits where we'll do the whole interior of the building, the whole exterior, and then they ask us about the damn sign. And I never liked that question until now. Because a lot of times you'd have to do custom solutions. You'd have to find LED chipboards and things and get
those
measurements.
Little things with the tape on the back and all that. Oh,
you got
man.
It. Yeah.
You got to get the electrical authority to come and inspect it, and it looks different. Oh, man.
Yeah. So now what Keystone has come up with is the Sign Hero. And what it is basically is they come in all the lengths that a fluorescent tube does. So the fixture has to be fluorescent for it to work, or the sign does, but a lot of them are. Mm-hmm. And it's rotatable end, double-ended, so you can get 360 degree of light. And it fits right in place. You bypass the ballast, you reuse the sockets, and everything goes. It's an easy solution, energy saving, all the goods that come with it.
Yeah, it's really a unique product from Keystone. So go to KeystoneTech.com or just Google Sign Hero Keystone, and it will come right up, son. That's right. And this episode of the show and every other episode of this podcast is sponsored by the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to NAILD.org, baby. Nail.org. But for now, we got some electric vehicle charging station talk on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, episode 41. Welcome to the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, David Rehimi.
Hey, thank you for having me. How you doing?
Doing well. Say hi to Greg Ehrich.
Hey, Greg. How you doing, man?
Good, David. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, no worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
No problem. So I went to David and I, just for the listeners out there, I went to an electric vehicle charging station conference in Ottawa, Ontario, a month ago, David?
Yeah. It was put on by Electric Mobility Canada. So they're like sort of like a lobbyist group up here in Canada for encouraging electrification and the benefits of that it has on the environment and stuff like that. It's a cool organization, and it was a good show, right?
Yeah, you know what, I enjoyed it. You know what was interesting about it, David, was that when I was there, the excitement and the action there was all like, to put it this way, all the graphs went up in that business.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So every graph you looked at, everything they showed was like, the adoption of electric vehicles looks like this. It goes straight up. Yeah. And the different types of charging stations that come up. And it really reminded me of the LED lighting business. It's saying 2013. It looked really similar. All the graphs went up. The costs were coming down. The customer adoption of the technology was really, really ripe. The idea of government rebates and being involved and encouraging people to take up this technology, it was very, very, very similar. What is it that you're seeing from a ChargePoint perspective in terms of engagement with distributors or people like typical electrical distributors? Are they becoming involved in this business now?
It's you want to talk about graphs going up. That exact side of our business is just absolutely flying right now. We've recently developed a electrical distributor team within ChargePoint because that demand is getting so high, and we're currently working with some of the biggest EDs in North America that are carrying our product as in addition to their portfolio of offerings, because it's coming up so much more often, and they're seeing it on specs, and they're seeing it on requests from ECs, and And it's just getting more and more prevalent, partly due to the fact that a lot of municipalities, they are requiring people to install charging stations, whether it's a commercial building or whether it's residential. Like here in British Columbia in Canada, the city of Richmond and the city of Vancouver, as well as another municipality, as well as many more that are soon to come, they're actually requiring that on new construction of multifamily dwellings, every single stall has to have the capability to install a charger. So in the electrical spec, they're having to account for a charger at every single stall at every multi-unit building. So it's definitely something that's on the radar for that world.
That's like adding a substation in every condominium, though, isn't it not?
It would be, were it not for, I mean, so it's provisioned in a way that allows for what's called power management or power sharing, which is a technology that we pioneered, which allows for a single 40 amp circuit to provide electricity to up to 4 stations. It can actually go more than that, but we don't usually recommend that you exceed a 4-to-1 power share, just based on the amount of electricity that's going to be provided and therefore the charge that the vehicle is going to get. But there's been some technological advances that are trying to combat the high infrastructure costs, because it's obviously that's, yeah, like you said, and also, taking into account that not everyone's going to be plugged in at the same time. People are going to be plugged in for a really long time, like it's your home, right? So it's where you're parked for 8, 10, 12 hours at a time. So you don't necessarily need 40 amps the entire time, because that'll give you 40 kilometers of range an hour, or I guess that's 25 miles. And people's daily commute is about that. So if you can spread that out, you divide it by 4, you're still getting 10 kilometers an hour. You're parked for 18, or for 8 to 10 hours. You're getting sufficient power on a power share in that scenario. So, but you're right. It's definitely something that has to be accounted for in specs, and you have to account for it when it comes to a building's overall load. That's why we integrate with a lot of building management systems, and we have some DR technology in our stations that allow you to ensure that if you're attributing a certain portion of the load to EV, that so that the overall load doesn't exceed X number, you can make sure that happens so that you're not having any trips, or if you have demand charges, depending on if you're in some of the states in the US that have demand charges, you can make sure that you can say that charging costs more, let's say, over peak hours versus when it's less expensive, and then through the station you're able to schedule your charges. So there's a lot, like I said, right, like we've been in this industry for so long that we've come up against a lot of the roadblocks that have been there from the beginning, and luckily we've developed workarounds for most of them, and so it's something that we pride ourselves on, so that we can allow people to buy electric vehicles.
So you sell the actual charging station itself, it sounds like. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and legit, or like physically speaking, what does a charging station look like? Maybe we can pull one up to at some point, but
yeah, sure. Well,
give us a little description.
So our commercial stations are like the ones that you would see at, we have a whole gamut of stations. That's the one of the things that we sort of identify with as an organization, is that we want to be able to provide people with a charging solution with whatever use case or whatever application they might require. So we have a full gamut, but what you'll mostly see is level 2 charging. That's off of that's a 40 amp, 240 volt or 208 volt feed, and the commercial station that we have at that capacity is the one that you'll see at the grocery stores or at the mall. The big commercial ones, they kind of look like a parking meter almost kind of thing, or like a payment kiosk for parking, except ours are we've integrated cord management into all of our stations, right? Rather than having to loop the cord back like a hose or whatever after you're done using it. You actually just holster it in the cord management. It's really nice and clean and allows you to just holster the stations. As well as all of our stations have an LCD screen, which give instructions to the user on how to use it, or you can actually upload a promotional video depending on who the site host is. So that's the commercial station. And then we have our home and our dedicated chargers for scenarios where it's at a multi-unit residential building or a fleet or at someone's personal home. And those, they have a little bit of variation between the home units and the commercial units, but they both look quite similar. And our CEO's goal with that station was that the footprint of the station was smaller than a piece of paper. So that's actually what it looks like. It's just under 8.5 by 11, and you just pop the charger holster in there after you're done, and it's about, I don't know, maybe 4 inches, 5 inches from the wall. It's really sleek, really clean.
So from a distributor perspective, so you walk into Costco, there's a skid of charging stations sitting on the skid. You grab one, you take it home, you buy it, you call your electrician and put it in. Is there anything more that distributors can do to facilitate this, make this easier? Like if I'm a lighting distributor, Greg's a lighting distributor, if we wanted to get in this business, what value add is there out there for us where we could say, yeah, but you can do that, but here's why you should deal with us?
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's because you want to avoid somebody buying a station because it's what's at Costco or at Home Depot, or it's because it's cheap, or because there's not enough education out there in this market. ChargePoint, the way that we sort of go about it from a sales standpoint, obviously we have our direct sales staff, but the demand is so high and it's so varied in terms of the industries that this is something that it applies to. Like if you think about it, anywhere that you park your vehicle, whether it's a mall, a school, a home, like that's our market. So it's really hard for us to be everywhere at once. So we actually work with a lot of distributors as value-added resellers to help us with the education aspect, because there's a lot of things that charger that you buy from Costco or Home Depot can't do, that whether or not you need it now, one day you probably will need it. It will be something that's going to be important. Things like smart charging, right? A lot of people, this is a battle that I face a lot in the distributor world is, oh, I don't need it to be networked. I just want to plug in the wall, right? Well, we've seen people who've tried that. We've seen some of the biggest names in the electrical component world try that, who have exited the market because they realized that, okay, no, it's not just a plug in wall. It's something that needs to be maintained. It's something that we need to communicate with remotely. It's something that we need to use to track the energy, right? Like imagine if you have to sub-meter every single charger in a multi-unit building. Your electrical room is going to look like a gong show, right? So we have embedded meters that are in most states revenue grade, so that you can actually provide that reporting to the utility if they require it. Or if, let's say, the utility is giving a grant, they're not going to give you that grant unless they're going to get that reporting out of you, and a dumb charger just isn't going to do that. So there's a lot of information that needs to be spread, and so we have. You said it earlier. You said how are we the value add? How can you be a value add? By signing up as a value-added reseller, right? We have a very wide.
Come on, David. This is the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. So I mean, what is it that? So you're at the counter. Someone wants to buy a charger. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're like, I can buy it at Home Depot for $800. I can buy it online from whoever for $750. And I've seen the cost spreadsheets on this. It's not a huge margin in it. And what I'm hearing from electrical contractors and people I talk to is, look, it's a glorified extension cord.
Yeah.
Right. And so
that's what you're going to hear.
Yeah, it's a glorified extension cord. They all have the same plug except the Tesla, and we have an adapter for the Tesla, right? So,
sure.
Oh, does it need to be networked? I mean, what percentage of ChargePoint sales are networked charging stations versus dumb charging stations?
We currently have, we just passed, I believe, 54,000 stations across North America. under every 2 seconds, someone's plugging into one of our stations. Every single one of those stations is a network station.
Oh, they're all networked. Okay. So then
all
in the industry, do we have any numbers about how many are networked? Like, for example, the other competitors out there, some of them, it's funny because I saw two different at the show. I saw two manufacturers that had exactly the same charging station, right? That clearly it's coming out of the same factory in China.
White labeled, yeah.
It's white label or whatever. Yeah, private label, whatever you want to call it. So those are not networked or connected charging stations.
Oftentimes they're not, but a lot of the times what some vendors will do is they'll get it's called a dumb station. That's an industry term. We're not trying to be a jerk. But they'll take a dumb station and they'll sort of stitch on a network on top of it. So those stations can be dumb, but they could also potentially be networked. You wouldn't be able to know just by looking at it. But in terms of the footprint of non-network stations versus network stations, it's hard to know because there's no way to track non-network stations. They're not on any sort of network, so you can't really count them or get a good handle of them. I guess the only way to be able to look would be through some user-generated websites that'll tell you what stations are out there in the public, but the stations could also be not publicly available. So I don't know. I want to say it's a vast majority of the stations are networked, especially the ones that last. Okay. But I'm sure that in some rural communities where you're not getting very much utilization, or at homes, I could see there being some not networked. But this is an essential amenity. This is something that people don't realize, right? If you're adding this to your condo or you're adding it to your workplace as an amenity for your employees, like this is how people are getting to and from where they need to go. This is how they're going to go pick up their kids. This is how they're going to go to the hospital if they need to. This is how they're going to go about their day.
It's going to explode. It's going to explode, and we want we want the listeners of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast to get a piece of the action, right, Greg? What's up? You're looking at me, you're pointing at yourself. You're like, I want to talk. What is it, Greg?
Well, I gotta know a little bit more about this. I did not attend the show. You guys did, so I really know not much at all about it. Do you actually buy the charging station, or do you buy the service of the charging station, or a combination of the two?
Are we going to charging stations as a service now?
That's what I'm wondering.
Hey, you can do it if you want. You can pay a monthly fee. We have a program called ChargePoint as a Service that allows you to put the chargers on an operational budget versus a capital expenditure that you can buy on that you can pay for it on an annual basis. But it's both, Greg. It's you purchase the hardware, right? And that's where we call ourselves. We have this cheesy tagline at HQ because our HQ is in Silicon Valley. So we call ourselves the Uber or the Airbnb of electric vehicle charging stations, which I always get a kick out of. But the reason they say that is because we don't actually own any of those 55,000 stations. We don't own any of them, right? We sell them to the end user, and then the site host gets to determine what they do with it. Now, what I mean by that is they get to decide if they want to make it public or not, if they want to charge people for it or not, if they want to have that price that they've set, if they want to have that change between time, like let's say, the first hour is this much, second hour is this much, time of day, from 9 to 5, it costs this much, from 5 onwards, it costs this much, and by driver group. So let's say, if you're a residential place, then you're saying that, okay, these people pay this much and visitors pay this much, that sort of thing. So that's why we let the site host determine all that stuff. Where we maintain a relationship with the site host on an ongoing basis is by allowing you to do those things, by providing you the software, providing you the software support. We have a 1-800 number on our stations that allow you to not have to worry about any troubleshooting with the users. So we maintain that on an ongoing basis in our relationship with the site host, but the site host owns and operates the stations for the most part.
Are there different charging speeds in terms of how fast it can charge a vehicle?
Yeah, so there's 3 main levels, we call them. Level 1 is your standard 120 volt that you plug in the wall. I'm going to talk kilometers, sorry, because I'm just so rehearsed in kilometers. But a level 1 station will give you about 7 kilometers an hour. So if you're looking at a 400 or 500 kilometer range Tesla, that's going to take you a few days to fill up. So We don't play in the level 1 space. Some others in the industry do, but we enter the market in level 2. Level 2 is 240 or 208, right? That's about 40 amps, and that'll give you, depending on the vehicle, between 20 to 40 kilometers of range. And then you go to our level 3, which is our direct current product, which is 3-phase power, and that'll give you up to 320 kilometers of range an hour. That's one that you're plugging in for.
So for our U.S. listeners,
8%.
That's 4.5 miles on the 7 kilometer. On the 20, that's 12.5 miles per hour or whatever it is. So carry on, David. Though just ran some calculations there.
12.5. You did that in your head, right?
No, I just had a calculator. I know it's divided by 1.6. Go ahead, Greg.
So you're talking on level 1, 2, and 3. So how many? This is more of a car question, but how many miles can they actually get then on one charge, or kilometers?
So
Give me the kilometers.
if it's per hour. See, the thing you got to remember is, like, because people always say, okay, how long would it take me to fill up a whole tank? And that's not really the measure we should be looking at, because you're not, when you come home every day and you're plugging in, you're not plugging in from zero, right? You're topping off. And most places that you go around town, you're topping off. So we should be thinking about how much range you add per hour. And in a hybrid with a level 2 charger, you're adding 12.5 miles. With a full electric, you're adding about double that, which is 25 miles an hour. So if it's a 200 range vehicle, then it'll take you 8 hours from 0 on a level 2.
Now, the infrastructure for that level 3, so I was at the show and I was seeing these extremely thick electrical cables that were liquid cooled and stuff like that.
That's right, yeah.
You know, you're talking about, so one guy said that the charger delivers 100 kilowatts to the battery. Like, that's a lot of electricity. That's like 10 single family homes.
And especially in peak times, that's you need some significant capacity to be able to handle that.
So is there like discussions with local distribution companies about the electrical infrastructure being able to handle a mass adoption of electric vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely. One of our biggest departments within ChargePoint is our utilities department. We have a team of folks who are dedicated, who come from a utility background, who understand the industry, and go in and they discuss strategies with various utilities across North America on a consultative basis at no cost. Just because it's something that, we have this sort of unique experience in the market, having been in it for 10 years, and we've seen everything by this time. And so we try and go around to places that haven't yet adopted EV or EV infrastructure and want to, and we talk to them about sort of what we've seen in the past and what works and what doesn't, so that we can avoid the mistakes happening in places that we want to encourage a faster adoption, so that we can sort of get over those hurdles before they occur.
Yeah, so you're kind of prepping the utilities a bit, saying, hey, wake up a little bit. This is coming for you. Think about your infrastructure. Let me ask you, maybe this question is stupid, maybe it isn't. And sometimes no question is stupid, but sometimes they are actually. Are you allowed to charge for electricity if you're not a utility? And is it different in different jurisdictions?
It's different in different jurisdictions.
So that's actually a good question, right? So like if you're setting up,
it is a very good question.
Like you're setting up, let's say you have a hotel. It's a good example.
Yeah.
And the hotel says, okay, we're going to do 50% of our parking spaces in our garage this year, and we're going to prep the electrical infrastructure and do this, and ChargePoint's going to, network them and everything. And then on your hotel bill at the end of the night, you're going to get a bill for 100 kilowatt hours after you plug in your car.
So in a lot of states, that's exactly how they do it. They do, like California, for example. Obviously, I know it's kind of unfair to use California as an example, but because they're so far and away in terms of EV, but you would get charged per kilowatt hour. And in many states, that's the case. Currently in Canada, you're not allowed to charge per kilowatt hour. So what we would do is we would charge per hour from a parking standpoint.
Okay.
But if you're charging by kilowatt hour in Canada currently, for any electricity, you're technically reselling electricity and therefore have to be a registered utility. That being said, there are a lot of efforts in place, again, with our utilities team, with our policy team as well, right? Like policy is huge, working with various level of government and educating them about EV. we work with them to try and discuss ways that we can avoid, again, any roadblocks that are standing in the way of EV adoption and EV infrastructure adoption. So in Canada, we're working heavily towards there being a way for customers to recharge for electricity.
Now you're talking in the multi-housing, I forget what province you mentioned, where they have to do
Sure.
A charging point for every stall in the multi-housing. Is there one that can do multiple stalls? Can you do one for two? Or I know that's logistics, but I'm just curious on cost standpoint. Can somebody get by with less stations but still get the same number of spots?
So no code, to my knowledge, no code in the world actually requires the charger itself to be installed. But the highest the highest it'll go is basically what they've passed in BC in a few of these cities, where the hard-wired infrastructure is required to be run to every stall. A lot of places will do the make ready. A lot of places will do just the conduit. But in BC, in those few municipalities, you have to have the 240 volt plug at every single stall. But that's not to say that each run it requires a dedicated 40 amp circuit, like I said. And that's not to say that every single one of those stalls it has to have a charger there either. It's going to be essentially like what we're doing with some developers is they're running the electricity to all their stalls.
This costs a lot of money, David. Like a lot of people don't.
So what they're doing is
the wires that you have to use. The wires that you have to use, those 6 gauge or 4 gauge plus voltage drop calculations. This is adding a lot of cost to building new units for sure.
Yeah. So what the developers are doing is that they're making it like an amenity. So they're saying, okay, you want to have the marble countertops, right. You want to have the top of the line fridge and the appliances, and you want to add a EV charger. And then that's how they're passing on the cost to their clients. I see what you're saying, and that's something that that a lot of the municipalities have gotten pushback from the developer industry. But the thing is we're already almost too far gone as it is with the multi-unit residential buildings that don't have electrical infrastructure, that have already been built, that don't have the chargers available to them. Like if you didn't have charging at your apartment building, are you going to buy an electric car? Probably not, right? No, and that's a big, because you want to talk about costs. How much is a retrofit going to cost?
That's the market that we're going to be in. That's the market that we're going to be in for sure, Greg. The existing infrastructure, addressing it. That's where our customers are, right?
And that's why lighting actually ties in so well with EV charging. And some of our best resellers are VARs, are LED retrofit companies or ESCOs, because what's happening is you're saving on a bunch of capacity by retrofitting to LED, right? You get this super sexy ROI that's happening in a year, 2 years. You add 6 months to that ROI, and you're offsetting the capacity that the old lights were using, and then you're adding in the EV chargers with no additional load, essentially, and they're paying for themselves in X number of months because of the savings that they're getting from the LED side. So it's a really nice value add.
What's the kilowatt average of an average level 2 charger? How many kilowatts does it deliver its peak?
6.6. 6.6. Yeah,
6.6. Let's say divided by 30.
An hour.
6.6. So 6,600 actually. 6,600 divided by 30. Right live on the show. That's 220 LED lights in a garage at 30 watts, Greg. That's a lot of lights.
Yeah.
So if you did a retrofit, an average garage, you took them from 2 lamp T8 down to 30 watt T LED or 24 watt LED. You're going to need 220 to get one EV station in that garage. That's a lot of lights.
That's taking 6.6 kilowatts 24/7, right?
Right. Yeah. You're going to have the staging. The staging. Yeah. This is an interesting business. I think. How would, in terms of, let's say you had mass deployments. Let's say you had someone who wanted 100 charging stations in their parking garage, and you have to address their electrical infrastructure, right? There's no way around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you might have to get an additional, you have to put in another transformer. You might have to get an additional fee from the utility. Like that's what we want to avoid the most, because as well as anybody, as soon as you go to the utility and say, hey, I need more capacity, you're looking six figures, right?
For sure.
But that being said, right, that's where it's like you try and get efficiencies wherever you can, right? And that includes in minimizing their current supply requirements, as well as offsetting it with some of the technology that we've been pioneering and trying to stretch the infrastructure as far as it goes. And at the end of the day, right, it's something that utilities want. So they're starting to become more and more cooperative when it comes to facing these types of costs and facing these types of hurdles, because at the end of the day, they're going to have more electricity on their grid. They're going to be in business, and most of the time, it's going to be like in BC, for example, we have all clean electricity. So
same in Ontario.
Some of the
really taking
same in Ontario.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Greg.
So
some of these stations, and I assume are outdoor, in a parking lot area. Can they ever combine solar power to power the charging station, or to provide the
good
kilowatts
question.
needed?
I've seen that. I've definitely seen that. There are even a couple distributors of ours who specialize in those type of canopies. They call them that. So you just hook up a canopy to a battery, and then you hook it up to the charger.
Now, do you envision in the future charging stations like a gas station now, or do you see it more as an addition to an existing business, like a restaurant or a gas station that wants you to come in and buy their food or whatever it might be?
Yeah, no, great question. That's probably one of the most popular questions I get, especially because in Vancouver there's this phenomenon happening right now where, because real estate's so expensive, all the gas stations are disappearing and people are buying the land and building apartment buildings on them. So I think we have like 1 or 2 gas stations left in Vancouver at this point, and everyone's saying like, so are they gonna like convert these gas stations into electric vehicle stations, right? And the short answer is no, because it's a totally different model, right? With an electric vehicle, we want to eliminate people having to stop to fuel up, right? We want charging stations to be wherever you're going to park anyways, so you can just pop it in while you're parked and while you're doing your stuff. And then you don't ever have the hassle of having to, go from work to pick up your kids from school, and you're running late and you're like, oh crap, I'm at empty.
I hate filling up my car with gas. I hate it.
Everyone does.
I hate it.
Right?
I hate it. Absolutely hate it. So like I drive an Audi, and it has 1,000 kilometers of tank, and I love that.
Yeah.
It's like 600 miles, Greg. Or 700 miles, something like that. I absolutely love that feature. That's the only reason why I bought the car, because I hate filling up gas in my tank. So the idea of a return to base model where you do your 300 kilometers a day in your sales calls, you're out running, Greg, you're selling light bulbs. When you go home, you plug that. What are you driving these days, Greg? The Suburban, or is it that big beast Yukon, of yours?
Real fuel efficient.
Yeah, you plug that big beast in when you get home, and off you go. Is the model, David, for like, here's the thing. So I'm a lighting distributor. I'm not a finance company. I don't have venture capitalists backing me. Here's a kind of dual question. And I'm interested in the existing real estate environment, because I think that's where, if I'm going to thrive, that's where it will be. I think trying to compete for the developer business and that, I don't see a lot of distributors getting that business.
Sure.
Is the model going to be give us your parking spaces? We'll incrementally put in our stations, and then we get the revenue from the meters, and you get the capacity? Or would Toronto, perhaps like a large LDC like Toronto Hydro, or what's that one in Minneapolis, Greg, called?
Xcel
Energy. Would they not just do this and pick up more clients, bill more people? What's the model going to be for the existing environment?
It's tough to say, because we're seeing a little bit of everything at this point with the utilities. There's some utilities who really want to hold this really close to them. There's some utilities that are even developing their own EV stations, right? So the future is still a little bit uncertain in terms of what their role is going to be. You see in Quebec, for example, the electric circuit, they have their hundreds of stations deployed that are under Hydro-Quebec. So it's, you see a little bit of everything, but ultimately it's going to be up to industry to figure this out, right? Because when you're letting private corporations that are competing for business work on something, that's where you're going to get the best product, right? And that's where you're going to get the best solution. Those are the people who listen to consumer demand the most, and so that's how it's sort of going to work itself out. And so far, it hasn't been in that model that you're discussing in terms of us owning the stations, of ChargePoint owning the stations, and then trying to make a profit on the energy. Like, you know how cheap electricity is, especially in comparison to gas, right? So trying to make a margin on electricity, you're going to be hard done by to try and recoup your costs on the infrastructure. Now, where utilities can come in is by, like you said, right? They want to have more plugs out there. They want to have more, widgets that allow people to consume electricity out there. So a lot of utilities, especially again in California, are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on these programs that encourage people to go out and purchase electric vehicle chargers. Because that is the biggest barrier. Everyone says chicken or the egg, right? Like, I don't want to buy an electric car because there's not enough chargers. Well, I don't want to install a charger because none of the cars are going to use them. So that's where a big role that we see utilities play and that we encourage them to play is by providing these types of incentives to allow people to purchase the chargers, even though there's not an ROI in it for them right now.
Okay. Greggy?
Yeah.
I think the only other question I have is just the life or the warranty on these products. Is it something, I know you can buy it, as you mentioned, as a service where you maintain it, but if you buy it and buy it outright, what kind of life can you expect and what kind of maintenance do you need to do to keep it running?
It's a good question. I mean, our stations, like, we're on the 4th iteration of our commercial product, so it's been pretty battle tested. I think we have like 30 million charging sessions worth of data that we keep and we store and we look at to determine how to best sort of configure our products to make sure they're as reliable as possible. So obviously, we stand behind our product and we've built it to a grade that is going to endure as much, wear and tear as possible. But, stuff happens, a snowplow might nail it, or somebody might back into it, or there could be issues with communications and the stuff happens. So it's hard to say. I usually benchmark at about 7 years, maybe 5 to 7 years for the lifespan of a charger with our current technology. But that being said, this is an important piece of it, right? Like, you want to have a charger that's going to be reliable. That, like I said, it's an essential amenity. So when it's down, you're able to go out there and fix it or get it fixed immediately, because this is how someone's going about their day. And so we provide proactive maintenance warranties and guaranteed uptimes and guaranteed SLAs and response times and stuff like that. Just to ensure that we're providing the level of support that's going to be needed if it's needed.
All right, man. Well, we got to figure out a way we can get a piece of the action here, David. I appreciate you coming on the show today and telling us a little bit more.
No worries.
So what's your website for ChargePoint?
Yeah, it's chargepoint.com. There's contact information there. We have local reps situated across Canada and the US and in Europe as well, if we have any European listeners. So feel free to reach out on the website. At the end of the day, what we want to do is we just want to get as much education out there as possible, because once the education is there, then people start going about things the right way. It's now you guys are basically EV experts at this time. So I anticipate you preaching the good word.
Thank you for coming on the program, David.
Hey, thanks for having me, you guys. This is great.
Thanks, David.
Keystone Technologies. Go to KEYSTONETECH.com, baby, and look for the Sign Hero. Why we want to do some Sign Hero, Greg? Come on.
Because it's one of the easiest solutions out there for a problem that's in the industry right now. A lot of signs have fluorescent lamps, T12 high outputs. They're expensive, hard to handle. And then there's ballasts that go with it and all these issues that you have right now. This tube comes in all the lengths that the T12s and T8s do right now, fits in place to the existing lamp, and bypasses the need for a ballast. So it does all that. It lights it better. It saves energy. It lasts longer. What more can you ask for?
You know what? It might be the most innovative, unique product I've seen in the industry in a long time. It really solved the problem, because before you'd have those little plastic things you peel and stick in the sign, and you had to kind of space them out, or you had some driver, and then you had to. This is a boom. You put the same thing in as before. You're back to one for one, even on signs. So go to KeystoneTech.com. That's KeystoneTech.com, or just Google Keystone Sign Hero. It'll come up. We'd like to thank the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, NAILD.org, for sponsoring every episode of the show you get on the GetAGripOnLighting.com website. And we'd like to thank David Rehimi of ChargePoint for coming on the show and telling us a little bit about the sales process in selling electric vehicle charging stations. Hey, son, if you want to add something to your line, depending on the rebates in your state, you may want to think about selling electric vehicle charging stations. Greg, are you thinking about it for Minneapolis?
It's crossed my mind after this podcast, definitely. I'm not sure I'm ready yet, but something to be aware of.
Yeah, Greg and I seem to think that the LED lighting thing is peaked. Oh, there's a little. If you listen to the end of the show and listen to the conclusion and all the ads, you'll see that Greg and I might have think this thing's peaked. So maybe we have to look for something else in electric vehicle charging stations for what we were thinking of on episode 41 of the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. You are lost, Lord is there to find you.